The woman who laughed at my warning. She laughed at me, right there in my courtroom, into a live microphone, in front of a full audience and rolling cameras. She threw her head back and laughed the way people laugh when they believe they are completely untouchable. The way people laugh when they have done this before and gotten away with it and fully expect to do it again. And I did not raise my voice. I did not slam my gavel. I simply looked at her. Quietly, steadily, the way you look at something you already understand completely. And that look, that silence, made her laugh even harder. She had no idea that the folder sitting in my lap contained the single document that would end her in less than 5 minutes. If you believe that the truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how deep someone buries it, please subscribe right now. Because what happened next in that courtroom is something I will never forget. Let me take you back to the beginning. Her name was Diane Mercer. She walked in like the courtroom was a runway, and the rest of us were the audience for her entrance. Designer outfit, perfect hair, a confidence that radiated from her like heat from asphalt in August. She set her bag down with a deliberate thud, crossed her legs with a dramatic snap, and surveyed the room with the expression of a woman who had already decided how the day was going to end. I have seen that expression before, many times, on many different faces. It is the expression of someone who has run the same play before, someone who knows the script by heart because they wrote it themselves and have performed it successfully enough times to believe it is foolproof. Diane Mercer was 51 years old. She had a lifestyle blog with a modest following, a taste for expensive things, and a talent she had been quietly cultivating for years. A talent for filing complaints against small businesses, claiming defective products, and extracting settlements from people who were too small and too scared to fight her. In the 3 years before she walked into my courtroom, Diane had filed 11 disputes against small online sellers. Every single one followed the same pattern. She would purchase a handmade or small batch product, receive it, post a dramatic video calling it defective or fraudulent, file a complaint for significant damages, and collect either a settlement or a refund while the seller's reputation burned behind her. 8 of those 11 sellers had closed their shops entirely after her attacks. 8 people, 8 small businesses, 8 human beings who got up every day and made something with their hands and their time and their hope. Gone. Because one woman decided their vulnerability was an opportunity. She never lost sleep over it. I am certain of that. Because Diane Mercer did not see herself as a predator. She saw herself as a savvy consumer, a woman who knew how to work the system, a woman who had figured out what the small print really meant and was simply smarter than everyone around her. She was so convinced of her own intelligence that she had on one occasion filmed herself explaining her method to her followers. A short clip, posted and deleted within hours, but not before someone screen recorded it. That clip found its way to my production team 6 weeks before the hearing, and the moment I saw her name on my docket, I started reading. The woman sitting across from Diane that morning was named Sophie Tran, 31 years old, Vietnamese American. She had been making handcrafted ceramic dishware from a small studio in her garage for 4 years. Mugs, bowls, serving platters, each one painted by hand in the hours between putting her 2 children to bed and collapsing into sleep herself. Sophie was not a business person by training. She was an artist who had turned her art into a way to survive. Her husband had lost his job 8 months earlier. The ceramic shop was holding the family together. Not comfortably. There was nothing comfortable about their situation, but holding. When Diane placed an order for a set of hand-painted bowls, Sophie spent 3 days on it. She photographed each bowl before packing. She wrapped them in layers of protective material. She included a handwritten note, the kind she put in every order, because she believed the people buying her work deserved to feel that a real human being had made it for them. Diane received the bowls on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, she had posted a video claiming they arrived cracked, the paint was flaking, and one bowl had a sharp edge that had cut her finger. She showed the camera a bandage on her hand with theatrical gravity and said she was considering whether to press charges. Within 12 hours, Sophie's shop reviews had been flooded. Strangers who had never bought a single item from her were leaving one-star ratings based on Diane's video. Sophie's sales collapsed overnight. She spent 2 days crying at her kitchen table while her children asked why she was sad. Then the lawsuit arrived. $12,000 for damages, emotional distress, and medical costs. Sophie had never been inside a courtroom in her life. She came to mine with a manila folder she had organized herself over 3 nights of sleepless research. Receipts, shipping records, her own photographs, printed emails, a handwritten timeline she had put together because she was determined to tell the truth as clearly as she possibly could, even if she did not know all the legal words to use. When she sat down at the defendant's table, she looked smaller than she was. Her voice, when she introduced herself, was barely above a whisper. She was not weak. I want you to understand that clearly. She was frightened. She was exhausted. And she was sitting 3 feet away from the woman who had tried to take everything from her, who was now lounging in her chair, radiating casual contempt, who had not even looked at Sophie since entering the room. That contempt told me everything I needed to know about Diane Mercer. I let the hearing begin as it normally does. I asked Diane to present her claim. She stood, smoothed her jacket, and launched into a performance I could tell she had rehearsed. The bowls were cracked upon arrival. The paint was clearly low quality. The sharp edge had broken the skin on her finger. She held up the same bandaged hand for the cameras as if on cue. She spoke fluently and with great feeling, leaning into phrases like, "As a consumer, I trusted this seller, and I have a right to expect basic product safety." Every few sentences, she would glance at the audience or the camera with just a hint of a smile. Not a full smile, the micro smile of someone who is performing sincerity. I have seen it thousands of times. It is the smile people wear when they are very pleased with how convincing they believe they are being. I did not react. I let her finish. Then I turned to Sophie. Sophie stood slowly. She opened her folder with careful hands, and she spoke. She explained how the bowls were made. She described the clay she used, the glaze, the kiln temperatures, the hand-painting process. She explained that she photographed every order before shipping, not because she expected trouble, but because the pieces meant something to her and she wanted to remember them. She showed me the photographs, the bowls in perfect condition, the careful packing, the tracking number confirming delivery. Her voice trembled once when she mentioned her children. She paused, steadied herself, kept going. She was not performing, she was remembering. And there is a difference that cannot be faked, not to someone who has spent decades watching people talk in front of her. Diane leaned back and stifled a small laugh. I looked at her calmly. "Something funny, Ms. Mercer?" Diane waved a hand. "She's very dramatic. Small sellers always are when they get caught." Sophie's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. I wrote one word in my notes. Then I asked Sophie to continue. "I want to pause here because I want to speak to you directly for a moment. Over the years, I have watched people like Diane operate in courtrooms, in workplaces, in families, in neighborhoods. People who have learned that the world rewards confidence, even when that confidence is hollow. People who have figured out that if you speak loudly enough and show enough outrage, a certain percentage of people will simply believe you because the performance is convincing and the truth is quieter and less entertaining. And they prey specifically on the people they believe will not fight back: the single mother, the small business owner, the immigrant, the person who cannot afford an attorney, the person who does not know the system well enough to navigate it alone, The person who trusts too easily because they themselves are trustworthy. That is not random. That is a choice, a calculated, deliberate choice to identify the most vulnerable target and attack it because the odds of consequence are lowest there. What Diane did to Sophie was not a misunderstanding. It was not a dispute between two reasonable people with different perspectives. It was a predatory act executed by someone who had done it before and expected to do it again. And the thing that kept her doing it was the assumption that no one was paying close enough attention. That assumption ended in my courtroom. When Sophie finished presenting her evidence, I turned back to Diane. I asked her to explain the photographs she had submitted with her complaint, the ones showing cracked bowls and flaking paint. She answered smoothly, "Those are exactly how they arrived." I nodded slowly. "And when did you take those photographs?" "Right after I opened the box." "Immediately after?" "Yes." I opened the folder on my bench. "Ms. Mercer," I said, keeping my voice very even, "the metadata embedded in the photographs you submitted shows the timestamp for each image. The bowls were delivered at 2:14 in the afternoon. Your photographs were taken at 11:47 in the morning of the same day." Silence. A real silence. Not the polite pause between sentences, but the sudden, absolute silence of a room that has just understood something. Diane blinked. Once. Twice. The timestamp on my phone is off. It's always off. All 3 photographs were taken at the same incorrect time, I said. 2 hours and 27 minutes before the delivery scan shows the package arriving at your door. The audience stirred. Sophie pressed her hand flat against her folder. Diane's composure cracked at the edges. Not fully, not yet, but visibly. She shifted forward. There must be an error in the records." "There is no error," I said. "The delivery company's scan is tied to GPS and time-stamped through their central system. It cannot be manually adjusted." I set the page down. "You photographed those bowls before they were delivered to you, Ms. Mercer, which means you did not photograph Sophie's bowls at all." A murmur moved through the gallery. Diane opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You can't prove those aren't the same bowls." "No," I agreed, "but I can prove they weren't the bowls Sophie sent you, because the cracks in your photographs follow a pattern inconsistent with shipping damage. I had them reviewed." I lifted a second page. "Shipping fractures spread outward from a point of impact. The cracks in your photographs run in parallel lines, the pattern left by deliberate scoring with a sharp tool." The room went very still. Diane said nothing. "You cracked these bowls yourself," I said, "before the delivery arrived." And that is when she broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. The laughter that had filled the room an hour earlier simply stopped. And what replaced it was something I have seen before. The expression on a person's face at the exact moment they realize the ground they were standing on is gone. Her eyes went glassy. Her jaw worked silently. Her shoulders, which had been squared and lifted the entire morning, fell. "I didn't," she started. "Ms. Mercer," I said gently, "I have your claim history. 11 disputes in 3 years. 8 closed businesses. I have the clip you filmed explaining your method to your followers before you deleted it. And I have the timestamps proving your photographs were staged." A tear slid down her cheek, then another. "Please," she said, so quietly I almost did not hear it. "I have bills. I thought it was an easy way to—" "I know what you thought," I said, and I said it without anger, because anger was not what the moment required. You thought the people you targeted were too small to defend themselves. You thought the system would not look closely enough to catch you. And you thought that if you were confident enough, loud enough, convincing enough, the truth would simply step aside and let you pass. She was crying in earnest now. not performing, really crying. The uncontrolled, humiliating kind that a person cannot manufacture on demand. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Sophie Tran did nothing wrong, I continued. She made you something beautiful. She packed it with care. She included a handwritten note because she is the kind of person who still believes strangers deserve to be treated with kindness. And you took that and turned it into a weapon against her. I looked at Sophie briefly. Her eyes were full, but she was not crying. She was watching, steadily, holding herself together the way a person holds themselves together when they have been waiting a long time to hear something true said out loud. I turned back to Diane. Your claim is dismissed, I said. You will pay Ms. Tran $6,000 for documented business losses resulting from your public campaign against her shop. You will pay $1,500 in court fees, and this case will be referred to the district attorney's office for review of potential fraud charges related to the pattern of claims in your history. Diane covered her face with both hands. Ms. Mercer, I said, my voice dropping to something quieter, I am not going to tell you that your life is over, because it is not. But this version of your life, the one where you find people who can't fight back and take from them, that version is finished. And if there is any part of you that still knows the difference between right and wrong, I hope you will take that seriously. She said nothing. She only wept into her hands. The gavel came down once. This court is adjourned. Sophie sat still for a long moment after the room began to clear. She did not jump up or celebrate or rush to call someone. She sat with her folder in her lap and her hands pressed flat on the table, and she breathed, in and out. The slow, deep breathing of someone who has been running for a long time and has finally been allowed to stop. I gathered my papers before leaving the bench. Our eyes met briefly. I gave her a small nod. She gave me one back. Nothing dramatic, nothing performed, just two women acknowledging a shared understanding that honesty, quiet and patient and stubborn as it is, had not been buried that day. It had held. The aftermath was swift. Within 2 days of the episode airing, the clip of the timestamp revelation had reached hundreds of thousands of views. Not because people enjoy watching someone cry, but because the truth landing with that kind of precision is rare and striking, and people recognize it instantly. Sophie's shop was flooded with orders from strangers who had watched the episode and wanted to support her work. She posted a simple update, a photograph of her workbench and a bowl in progress, with the caption, "Still here, still making, thank you." It was shared thousands of times. Diane's dispute history became public through news coverage of the case referral. Several of the 8 sellers she had previously driven out of business came forward publicly. Their stories confirmed every pattern I had seen in the file. I do not know what happened to Diane after that. I know the district attorney's office opened a review. I know her blog went quiet. I know that the careful, polished persona she had built over years was suddenly visible for what it was underneath, a performance designed to obscure the damage being done. But I did not spend time on her outcome. That was no longer my work. My work was the hearing, the truth. Sophie. I have been asked many times over the years what the hardest part of this job is. People expect me to say something about difficult cases, complex law, emotional testimony. But the honest answer is simpler and harder than any of that. The hardest part is watching good people absorb the cost of someone else's dishonesty. Watching a young mother sit across a courtroom from the woman who burned her livelihood to the ground and having to wait patiently for the right moment to set the record straight. Watching Sophie hold herself together for weeks while her family absorbed a blow she did nothing to deserve. That is the part that tests you. Not the arrogance. Arrogance is easy. I have been reading Arrogance for 50 years. I can hear it in a sentence. I can see it in the way someone sets their bag down. What tests you is the patience required to let the truth do its work on its own timeline. Because the truth does not move at the speed of outrage. It does not trend on demand. It does not perform for an audience. It simply accumulates, quietly, carefully, one documented fact at a time, until there is so much of it in one place that no amount of confidence or volume or distraction can hold it back. That is what happened in that courtroom. Diane spent years building a system designed to outrun the truth. She made it loud. She made it convincing. She made it fast enough that by the time anyone looked closely, she was already gone. But the truth kept accumulating anyway, in timestamps, in metadata, in the screen-recorded clip she thought was deleted, in the pattern that became visible once someone stopped to connect the dots. And eventually, it was all in one folder, on my bench, waiting for the right moment. I did not crush Diane Mercer with rage. I did not need to. I simply opened the folder and let the truth speak. That is the job. That has always been the job. Not to be the loudest person in the room, not to perform justice, to hold the line, to stay patient, to wait for the moment when the facts are assembled and the room is quiet enough to hear them, and to never, not for a single moment, let the noise convince you that the truth is not coming, because it is always coming. It just takes as long as it takes. If this story reminded you that honest people deserve someone in their corner, leave the word truth in the comments below. And if you know someone who has ever been targeted simply because someone else believed they were too small to fight back, share this with them today, because they deserve to know that the truth does not forget them. It just arrives on its own schedule.